There comes a point in life when the noise gets quieter, but the emptiness gets louder. You wake up, go to work, answer messages, pay bills, keep the house standing, keep your face calm, and still, something inside feels unfinished. Not broken exactly, just tired, like you've been walking for years without ever choosing the road. And maybe the hardest part is that nobody around you seems to notice. On the outside, you are functioning. On the inside, you are asking a question that feels too heavy to say out loud. Is this really all there is? For many men and women, especially after 35, life stops feeling like an adventure and starts feeling like repetition. Same routines, same worries, same obligations. The days begin to blur together until you can no longer tell whether you are building a life or simply enduring one. And for men in particular, there is a quiet pressure to stay composed, to be useful, to keep moving even when the soul feels drained. So instead of confronting the emptiness, many men numb it. They distract themselves. They postpone. They call it being practical, but deep down it is often fear wearing a respectable mask. A man can have money and still feel weak. He can have experience and still feel lost. He can be surrounded by people and still carry a silent shame that says, I should be more than this. And that shame, if it is never faced, turns into passivity. Then passivity becomes identity. Then life becomes something that happens to you instead of something you shape with your own hands. If that sounds uncomfortable, good. Truth should wake you up before it comforts you. Because the emptiness you feel is not always a sign that something is wrong with you. Sometimes it is a sign that you are living below your potential, below your responsibility, below the weight of who you could become. And once a man begins to see that, he can no longer pretend. If this message is already hitting a nerve, take a second and like this video. It may help it reach someone else who needs to hear it too. But more importantly, ask yourself this. What exactly has been draining your life of meaning, fear, or inaction? And if you stay with me, I'm going to show you why that question changes everything. At some point, many people wake up and realize they are not living the life they chose. They are maintaining it. They go to work, pay the bills, answer messages, smile at the right times, and keep moving through days that feel strangely identical. On the outside, everything can look fine. On the inside, something important is missing. Not excitement, not comfort, meaning. That emptiness does not usually arrive with drama. Comes quietly. It shows up in the silence after the noise fades, in the drive home after another long day, in the moment you sit alone and feel that your life has become more routine than purpose. And for many men, especially, that feeling is unbearable because they were never taught how to face it honestly. They were taught to suppress it, distract from it, or bury it under responsibility without reflection. A man may tell himself, I'm doing what I'm supposed to do, but deep down, he knows that obedience is not the same as direction. He can provide, endure, and survive, yet still feel weak in the one place that matters most. His inner life. A life without purpose makes even strong men feel hollow. It drains their confidence, turns ambition into fatigue. It makes the future feel smaller each year. And this is where many people make a dangerous mistake. They think purpose is something they will eventually find if they wait long enough, as if it were hidden somewhere outside them, ready to appear when the timing is right. But life rarely works that way. Meaning is not delivered to passive people. It is built by those willing to take responsibility for something bigger than their own comfort. Think about the men and women you admire most. They are rarely the ones who simply avoided pain. They are the ones who accepted a burden and carried it with dignity. They became useful. They learned to solve problems, protect others, create value, and stand firm when life demanded more from them. That is not accidental. That is the psychology of purpose. When your life helps reduce disorder in the world, your own soul begins to organize itself. So ask yourself something honest. What problem are you capable of solving? What weakness in your character keeps you small? What responsibility have you been avoiding because it asks more of you than you feel ready to give? These questions matter because the empty feeling does not vanish through entertainment, comfort, or endless thinking. It only begins to change when a man stops hiding from the weight of his own potential. And once he sees that clearly, he can no longer pretend not to know what comes next. The strange thing about emptiness is that it does not always arrive as pain. Sometimes it comes as routine. You wake up, you work, you pay bills, you answer messages, you carry the weight of the day, and yet something inside remains untouched, almost invisible. It is like living in a house with all the lights on and still feeling lost in the dark. For many people, especially men who were taught to stay quiet, stay useful, and never complain, that emptiness becomes familiar. So familiar that they stop questioning it. But a life without purpose does not announce itself with drama. It erodes slowly. First, you stop caring as much. Then you start saying, "That's just how life is." Then one day you look in the mirror and realize you have become a spectator in your own existence. You are there but not fully there. Moving but not directed. Responsible but not truly alive. And this is where many weak men make a tragic mistake. They think purpose is a feeling. They wait to discover something magical, as if meaning were a signal from the sky that will arrive only when they are ready. But purpose is rarely found in comfort. It is built in tension. It is carved out by resistance. A man becomes clear not when life gets easier, but when he finally decides to stop avoiding what is hard. Think about the moments when you felt most alive. Probably wasn't when you were drifting. It was when you were needed, when someone depended on you, when you had to rise, organize, protect, solve, or endure. There is something deeply healing in usefulness. Not fake busyness, not endless distraction, but the quiet dignity of becoming someone who can carry weight. A wise man once said, "If you want to know what your life is for, look at what suffering you are willing to confront." That question cuts through illusion, because your calling is not always hidden in what excites you. Sometimes it is hidden in what you cannot ignore. The broken family, the neglected body, the business that could be built, the child who needs a father's steadiness, the community that lacks leadership. Meaning grows where responsibility is accepted. And maybe that is why so many modern men feel empty. They have been trained to consume, not to construct, to react, not to lead, to protect their comfort at all costs, even if it costs them their soul. But comfort without mission becomes a cage. Eventually, a man must ask himself, am I living to be entertained, or am I living to become useful? If that question hits something inside you, stay with it, because the answer may change everything in the next moment. What emptiness really does to a man is not always dramatic. It does not arrive like a thunderclap. More often, it settles in quietly, like dust on a forgotten shelf. You wake up, work, pay bills, answer messages, go through the motions, and somewhere beneath all of that, something in you asks, is this all there is? That question can haunt a man for years if he keeps distracting himself long enough to avoid hearing it. And yet, that emptiness is not always your enemy. Sometimes it is the first honest signal that the life you are living is too small for the person you are meant to become. A weak life feels safe at first because it asks little of you. It lets you drift. It lets you stay decent but never dangerous to your own comfort. It lets you avoid risk, avoid conflict, avoid the burden of becoming stronger. But the price of that comfort is high. The soul grows heavy in a life without responsibility. The mind becomes restless. The body ages. And the spirit starts to whisper that you have been betraying yourself for years. A wise man once said that a person does not find meaning by looking inward forever. He finds it by taking responsibility for something beyond himself. That is where purpose begins to breathe. Not in fantasies, not in applause, not in the shallow chase for validation. Purpose appears when your strength is needed, when your discipline is tested, when real life presents a problem that does not care about your excuses. A father who must guide his children, a husband who must rebuild trust, a worker who must become excellent, a man who has to get up before the world does and carry the day with integrity. These are not burdens meant to crush you. They are the very things that give your life weight. And maybe that is why so many men feel lost now. They have been taught to avoid pressure, to soften every edge, to treat discomfort like a flaw instead of a forge. But a life without pressure produces no steel. It produces weakness dressed as peace. If you have felt that hollow feeling, ask yourself honestly, where have I been playing small just to avoid the pain of becoming accountable? Where have I confused freedom with drifting? The answer may not come all at once. But once you start asking the right questions, your life begins to change its shape. And if part of you knows this is true, then stay with me, because the next part will show you exactly what a meaningful life demands and what it costs to finally step into it. What emptiness really feels like is not always dramatic. Sometimes it is quiet. It is the man who wakes up, gets dressed, goes to work, comes home, scrolls, eats, sleeps, and repeats. It is the woman who has done everything right, yet still feels like something essential has gone missing. On the outside, life continues. On the inside, something has gone dim. And that is why so many people don't recognize their own suffering until it becomes unbearable. They call it stress. They call it burnout. They call it being tired. But underneath, it is often the soul asking a simple question. What is this all for? A weak life is not always a bad life. That is what makes it dangerous. It can be comfortable enough to tolerate, but empty enough to slowly erase you. You stop asking hard questions because the answers might demand change. You avoid responsibility because responsibility exposes your limits. You tell yourself you are waiting for the right time, the right motivation, the right opportunity. But the truth is, meaning rarely arrives before movement. It usually comes after you begin carrying something that matters. A wise man does not build his identity on how he feels in the moment. He builds it on what he can be trusted to do when no one is clapping. That is where purpose begins to take shape. Not in fantasy, not in motivation videos, not in hoping someone will rescue you from your own inertia. It begins when you look at your life honestly and ask, where am I needed? Because the human spirit does not come alive through comfort alone. It comes alive through usefulness. Think about the last time you helped someone in a real way. Not with a clever comment, not with a performance, but with something solid. A burden lifted, problem solved, person steadied. In that moment, something inside you likely shifted. You were no longer just existing. You were participating. That is the feeling many men have lost. The deep satisfaction of being needed, of being capable, of standing in a storm and not folding. And maybe that is why so many people feel disconnected today. Not because they lack information, but because they lack a mission. They have opinions, distractions, habits, and even dreams, but no anchor. They know what they dislike, but not what they are willing to build. They know what wounds them, but not what they are prepared to serve. Yet the path forward is often hidden in plain sight. Your purpose may not be some grand destiny waiting in the clouds. It may be the next honest responsibility you have been avoiding. If this is hitting close to home, pause for a second and ask yourself, what problem in my life or in someone else's have I been avoiding because it would require me to grow up? And if you can answer that honestly, you are closer to purpose than you think. The only question now is whether you will act on it or keep waiting for life to become meaningful on its own. When a man finally stops running from his own life, something quiet but powerful begins to happen. The noise inside him starts to fade. He no longer wakes up asking, is this all there is? Because he has begun to answer that question with his choices. He gets up, he works, he serves, he carries his responsibilities with a steadier heart. Not because life suddenly became easy, but because he stopped waiting for life to give him permission to matter. That is the turning point so many people never reach. They keep searching for a feeling, a sign, a perfect opportunity, and all the while their days slip through their fingers. But purpose was never meant to be found like a lost object on the road. It is built. It is tested. It is earned in the moments when nobody is watching, when excuses would be easier, when fear says, stay small, and you answer, not today. And maybe that is where your life has been feeling empty. Not because you are broken, not because you are too late, but because some part of you knows you were made for more than comfort, more than distraction, more than repeating the same empty patterns until time runs out. Deep down, the soul recognizes truth when it sees it. It knows the difference between merely existing and truly becoming. So ask yourself honestly, what if the emptiness you feel is not a curse, but a signal? What if it is calling you back to discipline, responsibility, and a life that carries weight? What if the very thing you have been avoiding is the doorway to the life you want? If this message spoke to something real inside you, take a moment to reflect on it. Sometimes one small act of recognition is the beginning of a much larger change. And if you want to keep walking this path with clarity, strength, and purpose, stay close. There is more ahead, and the next step may be the one that changes everything.